Hi, yeah, I'm Kevin Barrington. I'm a Dubliner. I was born in this town, born in Coolock, and then moved to Monkstown. And I've lived here amongst about a dozen other places over the past 40 years or so. And since we're talking about years, I'm heading north of 60. And I'm here to yap about all the various bullshit things I've done with those years.
So, Kevin, thanks for agreeing to do the
Yeah,
interview.
you're most welcome.
So, Kevin, you're a writer. You've been a
Yeah, so
journalist
it's,
or a writer.
yeah. Yeah, I've always, in everything I've done, I've always written. I think I started out. Actually, curiously enough, the first thing I wrote was the first day I signed on the Dole was out in Dunleary just before Christmas, and it was back in the early '80s where you didn't need to know where the fucking Dole office was. You just would follow the crowds there, and I remember walking in. And I was kind of, first time doing it, I was kind of looking around and I kind of noticed a couple of guys coming in on my fucking six. And next minute, one of them pulls over a fucking balaclava, pulls out a sawn-off shotgun, shoots the fucking thing in the air. It was double dole day coming up to Christmas. They leap over the fucking counter and they grab the fucking money and they're gone in about a minute and a half, I'd say. But everybody in the fucking dole office was like kissing the ground. And I remember as everybody stood up, I said, wow, that's a huge amount of smoke from fucking one shotgun blast. But every fucking person had a little cigarette as they got up. And they're all being real fucking blasé about how you get a lot of this shit coming up to Christmas. None of the fuckers were thinking what I was thinking, is the fucking money's gone. Because the government's got loads of money. It's all been fucking robbed. So anyhow, I wrote about that for Hot Press, which was kind of comical because I wrote the whole thing about what was it going through my head as I stared into the ground. But like a week later, the police were in my house, kind of reading all the fucking bullshit that was going through my head, trying to do an interview, and I go like, I saw nothing. I saw a guy put down a balaclava, and the rest of it is just fucking fantasy. But anyhow,
That's your introduction to writing?
that was my introduction to writing.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I'd studied English in college, and I'd done like writing essays and shit like that. But that was the first shit I got paid for. And then I did a piece about the 40 foot, and then I went on tour with some band. And then in the back of my head, I always kind of wanted to be a foreign correspondent and cover wars for a while. And I got a job in an advertising agency, but I managed to get 3 weeks holidays. And a mate of mine's father was the chief of staff of the Irish Army, and they were out in Lebanon at the time, and he was the head of the gig in Lebanon. So this guy said if you wanted to come to Lebanon or Israel or the fucking occupied territories, that would be a place to stay either with the Irish Army in Lebanon or with the UN and the rest of the places. So I said, I'm fucking on. I said, listen, you bring a camera and I'll write it. And he forgot to bring the fucking camera. But I did a big piece on it was the first anniversary of the first Intifada, when they were out throwing stones. So I interviewed a whole load of fucking Palestinian academics, and I was having a difficult time in Jerusalem because the only people I was meeting on the street were the settlers, basically were mainly Americans coming over with Uzis hanging off them talking about like shooting Arabs. And I was like, man, there has to be more to Israel
So,
than this.
how old are you now at this time?
24,
As a
5.
young Irish war correspondent. Basically.
Yeah, well, I wasn't quite that yet, but that's what I was trying to hack my way out to be. But I'd actually written a piece about David Nars's homosexuality case going to the European Court, and I told him I was off to Israel. So he gave me the number of his then boyfriend Ezra, so I decided to ring him up. And because I was there with this other guy, I think they thought we were a gay couple too, and so whatever. But they were all Peace Now activists. Right. So suddenly I tapped into the side of Israel that you don't see that easily. The fucking, the people who were actually out there working in the fucking West Bank for fucking peace and things, Right. And this is the guy that got destroyed by the Israelis, allegedly for going out with a young Palestinian. But I wouldn't be surprised if there were dirty tricks in there as well. But these guys were all writers, psychiatrists, and they were talking about how the occupation was corroding the soul of Israel and how they were going to turn on themselves and start killing each other. And a year later, Rabin gets assassinated. So they were all sharp and prescient. Anyhow, I got that out. So that was kind of a calling card. But like trying to get a fucking job, and even if you got into the fucking Irish Times, you'd be there for a decade, stabbing cunts in the back, trying to get the one bleeding assignment. So I said the only way to do this really is to go and put myself into it. So in 1990. The Paris Peace Accords in Cambodia were signed about 89, and which was to lead the way to what was then the biggest UN operation in history. So in 1990, I went into Cambodia, which was still a very the Vietnamese had pulled out, but it was still a very isolated country. There were no Western embassies or anything like that. It was still a curfew at 9 o'clock.
Right.
You know, when I landed in the airport, there was no fucking transport there. You know, like there were no taxis or motorbikes or anything like that. The only fucking transport I could see were a couple of tanks going down the fucking road, and but pretty much simultaneous with me crossing into Cambodia, Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait. So that just, you know, the world was going to war, you know, unless there was a major fucking massacre. And like, you know, I was kind of sitting there saying, Jesus, I'm only starting this, I'm already coming a scumbag. I'm sitting here praying for a massacre, you know, so I can turn a buck. I said, no, you can't be doing it. So and then when I did try to go up country, you know, they had never met someone like me before, someone kind of winging it. And I told them I was working for a socialist law sharing newspaper, which didn't go down with these fucking communists because they were all billionaire communists. And, you know, I said I wanted to go up to Compton. I said, yeah, you can go, but you need a fucking military escort and you stay in the governor's guest house, and that'll be $3,000, please. And like, you know, you know, if you're the New York Times, you fucking pay them that money or you bargain them down to 15. But I just wasn't in that game at all. And when I kind of backed off, they turned totally communist on me and told me to come in every day and write an account of who, you know, where I'd been, who I talked to, what I talked about, which I didn't do. But I knew my days were getting numbered. And then I decided to take a vain attempt to try and fucking ring RTE and the Irish Times. And I went down to the post office, but the fucking calls were routed through fucking Russia. So you could hear 35 people on the line, you know.
So were you out there as an independent? Hoping
So
to kind of sell what
but I mean, it's that, and like, you know, it's a really tough fucking gig because, I mean, even when I got to, you know, to do it kind of properly, which I'll get there in a minute or two, like, if you're asking people to risk their lives, it's a very expensive proposition no matter where you are, and understandably fucking so. Like, if you want to hire a car that's normally 30 quid a day, but like, if there's a chance the guy's going to get shelled off the fucking road, you know, he want 300, and why the fuck wouldn't he? But I mean, I realised these phones, there was no point ringing a radio station with them. She couldn't do a fucking interview over that. So I found there was one fucking posh hotel that they'd started building in the 70s, and then the fucking Khmer Rouge came to town, so it never got finished. And they just finished it the previous year. It was French owned, and I went in there, they had a satellite phone, which was rock and roll and groovy. But the downside was it was $25 a minute out.
A minute? Oh my God.
Yeah, so I rang the fucking I rang RTE and I didn't really get anywhere. I rang the Irish Times and the foreign editor came on and he was the most indecisive talkative fucker I've ever fucking met. But I didn't think it mattered because I was thinking I've like, you know, I fucking paid my money. So I thought I owed them about 200 quid from that. But when eventually, you know, I didn't get anywhere with either because they said keep in touch if anything exciting happens, but like, you know, they weren't biting on anything I had at the time. And then I said, how much is that phone call? And they said it'll be $990, please. Well, I didn't realise it was $15 a minute incoming. So while Mr. Irish Times was on, he cost me $600, which is more than I would have made from a fucking story with it. So this, you know, this is the time to when getting the story was only half the job. Trying to, you know, if you're up country, trying to get it out because there were no phones, no mobile phones. You know, you'd be running into army fucking bases, right, using a radio, you know, and trying to dictate like a radio story to someone, which is not fucking easy to do. But anyhow, I bailed. I fucking bailed because it wasn't happening, and went to Bangkok and tried to get a job in Bangkok. But like Bangkok, you get a job in, but you only make enough money to keep living there. You couldn't make enough money to make another break, and I needed to get cash to try.
Did you do teaching there, or what did you do?
Well, actually, I didn't because I did scams and smuggling and refugee smuggling and all that type of bullshit. And then when I started looking at real jobs, I said, fuck it, no, we need to go to Hong Kong where we can make. And like, we flew to Hong Kong, we got a job getting off the fucking bus as extras in Kung Fu movies, which we thought was great because we still had Bangkok heads on us and we were getting paid $200 or something for the day. But then when you realise what it took to get an apartment in Hong Kong, you needed about $6,000 up front to get a. So I got a job in an ad agency. They were paying a stupid amount of money, but like, you know, I didn't particularly like Hong Kong, and we were doing too many drugs there.
What was that like over there on, say, on that sort of alternative cultural side, Hong Kong in the 80s, 90s?
It was, you know, like, I come from fucking Bangkok, Vietnam and Cambodia, you know, so I was back in a fucking city. And it was it's a very full-on sort of city. Like, you know, in that sort of New York sense, like, it's speedy, it's all go. It's very, very fucking claustrophobic, you know, it's, but for a city of that that sort of intensity and energy. It didn't, or it certainly, I didn't find it in the first year. I couldn't find a really interesting cultural side to it. So it was just like, it felt like a rock that everybody was clinging on by their fingernails, making as much fucking money as possible. And it was a bit hardcore, so like every fucking day was like Christmas Eve in Grafton Street. And I remember my girlfriend used to be, because I went to work, she got a job in a bar, but when I got this job I was making so much money. I said, don't bother, like if you don't want to do that, don't do it, because it's you you don't have to, we don't need it, So she'd space around and go shopping and things. I remember one day I didn't go to work, and I went down to the supermarket to get some beers or something like that, and there was one guy in front of me, it was me, and then there was like an old lady, 78, 80. And the guy in front of me is finished, and I go to put my six packs on the counter. I get a fucking elbow in the kidneys that literally knocked me onto the fucking ground. Right. And your woman just steps in front of me and takes it. So she took me out to skip the fucking queue. And I remember going home to my girlfriend and said, man, I went to the Christian Brothers. They never really taught me what you do in a fight with an 80-year-old woman, I said, and she said, this happens to me all the time. You get pushed. I just fucking push them back at this stage. I said, well, you could do that. You're a woman. I can't be seen pushing back out. So yeah, it was, friends would ring up and say, I'm going to come to that part of the world. Can you stay? I said, of course you can fucking stay. But I said, I wouldn't spend more than a week here. If it's just like. I mean, my first night there, I was lost. I went up to Three China. Now, this isn't indicative of everybody, but it was indicative of an attitude there. There were a lot of fucking asshole Brits there, real colonial fucking types, and like, I despised them. But some of the Chinese have gotten as bad, I went up to these people, and they were all Armani suited, like really wealthy looking dudes, and asked them directions, and one of them turned around and spoke impeccable English and said, sorry, I don't speak any English, and I was going like, throughout fucking Southeast Asia, and I hadn't come across it, and the whole fucking yuppie thing was still on. It wasn't what I was fucking looking for. So, and like at weekends we'd go out to one of the islands, but the fucking rooms you'd be renting would be like that size, sort of. Like the space is such a fucking premium there, And then basically what used to happen in Hong Kong, you only got taxed 15%. But where like financial reality hit back in was on rent. That brought fucking things back into it. You'd be paying $5,000 a month in rent type shit. We were lucky. We got a place. I don't know what brought me there, but the lift didn't work on the second day, and there were fucking syringes and all the on the stairs. But the actual apartment, once you fucking closed the door, it was the business. So yeah, they don't come looking for taxes for 2 years, and if you skip town before that, it's on your employer to pay the tax for you. Now in my ad agency there was someone else, kind of the person I got on best with there, and surprised, he'd been there about a year ahead of me, surprised he skipped town, and the company ended up liable for his tax. So I think what they did, they obviously told the tax man about other people that they might have been a bit suspicious of. So I got hit with the tax bill after only 12 months.
Right.
And it was for about 15,000. And I'd managed to save about 15,000, but I hadn't saved anything above that. So I said to my girlfriend, I said, I'm gonna have to pay this fucking tax, and try and, do this show better next year. And she looked at me and I said, yeah, I know, it's impossible. I said, right, we've got to hightail it. So we hightailed it in great style. I used to do the advertising for one of these fucking 5-star hotel chains, I can't remember which one. And I was told to go and spend the weekend there. And I was told to go out to the airport. To understand what I was writing about, man.
Yes,
so I had to go to the airport to get picked up by a Rolls Royce to be brought there. And I was going, for fuck's sake, man, could you not just come to my fucking squalid flat and pick me up here? I'd imagine the airplane bit. But anyhow, we were told to carte blanche, they'd one of the best Chinese restaurants in fucking town. So anyhow, we did all this, and then we met all the fucking management. We all had brunch together. We all said, oh great, you do great work and all that. And I had a plane booked for the next morning. So I hightailed it now. I think there might have been a similar amount of money owed to a bank, and there were a couple of us, so I just did it. But I had about 20,000 or so, maybe 30 saved up, so I was in a much better position to be trying this again. And I started making my way slowly back towards Cambodia via Bangkok. The coup happened there, and kind of covered that and did a piece for Hot Press on that. And then went into Vietnam, did a bit of travelling in Vietnam, but didn't go that far up because I was always conscious I'm about to turn around and go back down to Cambodia.
Right.
So I went with my girlfriend this time. The first time I left her back in the Thai island because I just thought it was going to be too dodgy. But this time it was a whole different ball game because 40,000 UN personnel had moved into the country. Every Western embassy had moved into the country. Every NGO had moved into the country. It was like fucking Dodge City. The fucking rents went up higher than Singapore in that year. It was fucking crazy. Like, it was one of the most. It had been the most isolated country I'd ever been in. And suddenly it was just fucking anything fucking goes.
Cambodia, you talking about?
Yeah. Like, when I was there in 1990, there were no Western embassies there. The only embassies there were Eastern Bloc, and the wall was going down, so they were all fucking. Russia had been supporting the Vietnamese, which kept up their occupation, but they were falling apart, so the Vietnamese left, and the Khmer started making advances. But there was a peace agreement going on, which brought the UN in, and I think that supposedly was supposed to bring democracy to Cambodia, and I'm a bit sceptical about if anyone ever believed they could do that. I actually think the real purpose of the mission was to undermine the Khmer Rouge, which it succeeded in doing. But I mean, it left the crowd in Phnom Penh still in power, who were all fucking former Khmer Rouge, but that's it's fucking Cambodia, nothing's ever simple. So anyhow, suddenly it was the white way, and 2 newspapers were starting up, and I got a job on one of them. Now it turned out to be a kind of a Malaysian PR company that was doing pro-government work, but they were planning to launch a paper in Khmer, but in the meantime they did an English thing they needed to put out, so I just took advantage of this to write my fucking hole off. And then when they wanted us to write simple shit that Khmer's would translate to both the government, I just said fine, I'm off. But at that stage I'd written enough that I was able to get a job elsewhere, and then I started stringing for. There was a girl correspondent in Agence France Presse who didn't like kind of going up country, and I was, young and dumb and thought it was bulletproof, so I'd offered to go fucking anywhere. So I started doing that, and then she left, and then they offered me to take over the gig, so it all worked out the second time around. So I became the Cambodia correspondent for the news agency, and did that for about 3 years.
Still able to maintain a hedonistic lifestyle, say, with girlfriend, proper job as a journalist. I mean, at that stage, for sure.
I was running a fucking drug habit the whole time, but it didn't matter. It didn't affect my productivity or my finances either. Because everything was so fucking cheap.
Yes.
If you weren't buying illegal drugs, you just go into a fucking chemist. So the only time it became dodgy, I remember a couple of times when I was out at the military, and I'm thinking, if the shit hits the fucking fan, or if I get captured, not alone am I going to have to deal with the fucking horror and potential assassination of being captured, I'm going to be fucking sick as a fucking pig too, and that wasn't that wasn't what I wanted. And I remember thinking, like, I used to think all the time, like, I don't mind if I get killed as long as I get fucking taken out, but by God, please don't let me to be dragged up those fuck, because it happened to friends of mine, and like, I had some lovely friends who ran a restaurant on the coast, and one of the rules is you're off the road before dusk, and they've been doing it for a year. They got a bit blasé, left it a bit late one time. In fact, they left it a bit late because some friend of a friend was coming in. Someone had met someone in Thailand and said, "Oh, you must go and see my friends in Cambodia." So this poor girl, it's her first day in fucking Cambodia, she's with my friends, they take off, they have a couple of drinks, leave it a bit late, they take off, and they run into Khmer Rouge on the road, and they're taken off up into the hills. And we were fed a fictitious kidnap story for about 3 months. In fact, they were assassinated, they were held overnight and assassinated the next morning for being neo-colonialists. Get your head around it. We like being taken out by ISIS. You're dealing with that level of extremism and xenophobia. So, like, literally, you were, in Phnom Penh, it was all corrupt.
And yet, did you feel secure? As a young man, say you're only coming into 30 there. You're over there. It's the early 90s. You're with a girl. You're holding down a pretty, respectable job, and you've got a responsible job, and you've got your sort of shadow side, your drug thing, and so how was your state of mind? Was there any paranoia about secret police ops, like kind of being looked at, being a journalist?
towards
your mental state.
towards the end, you know, I was getting a bit burnt out, and this is like 3 years later. I'm now 33, and I'd split up with my girlfriend. I'd fallen in love with this American girl, and she had left, and I was asking me to come over and follow her, and I started doing huge amounts of drugs. Nigerian traffickers had moved into town, and I remember going scoring off them, and I'm opening the door of the hotel one day, and I saw a whole load of fucking police uniforms. And I went, sweet mother of shit. They'd be like, and then, but they weren't. They were buying the shit off these guys. Then I was going home thinking, hang on a second here, you're a fucking journalist. You're giving these fuckers a very hard time, and they're getting fucking hip to the fact that, you know, once again, you're compromised.
Yes.
So, you know, and then there was this beautiful American woman over in California saying, come over. So everybody said, don't be fucking insane. You're giving up a fucking, you know, a serious fucking job that you spent your, you know, that this is what you wanted to do. And for the first fucking year doing it, I was on fucking cloud 9. I was so fucking happy doing it. I never felt any danger in that. It was just the fucking sheer rush of experience.
You're bulletproof and adventurous.
Yeah. And you're fucking, you know, the UN where they were hopping helicopters. It's like being in Vietnam again. You know, you're fucking, you know, smoking premium ganja, flying over the jungle, and it was fucking like a young man couldn't ask for fucking more. And a bit like Vietnam too. You go up, you be out in the fucking boonies, you cover this shit. You know, you hop in a fucking taxi and make your way back to an airbase. The UN would give you a lift, and like 48 hours later, you're back sipping wine and eating the best French cuisine in fucking Phnom Penh. You know, it's and at the time there were no guidebooks. Like the type of people, even the backpackers turn up, they were all really fucking interesting people because it wasn't fucking easy at the time. You know, so I used to fucking love just going into a bar and you'd be sitting there, you know, you'd be some fucking, you know, interesting dope smoking backpacker, 2 Irish cops, you know, the French military attaché. So you'd end up in marvellous social situations that you don't get when you're home because you're hanging, you know, with the same type of people, you know. So it was magnificent, but this American was you know, young and beautiful, and so I think partly.
Yeah, what happened there? Did you go for it?
Yeah, well, curiously,
of course you did, but everyone told you not to.
We actually, everybody was so adamant about how I wouldn't like LA, how I wouldn't fit in there. I kind of got perverse about it, you know. I fucked a lot of years, you know. And she, Liz, is her name, Liz Gilland. I had met her at what was tragically the first rock and roll concert in Saigon since James Brown played for the Troops, and it was fucking Bryan Adams, you know, the Canadian dude.
Of course.
And it was part of a, you know, kind of Ho Chi Minh City opening up. There was a marathon on that day, and then this was the first concert. Now the tickets were like about $25 or something, which was quite a lot of money for the Vietnamese at the time. So the place wasn't full. So the manager had been going around that day, and any good-looking Western chick he saw, give them free tickets just to fill the place up. So this was Liz. So I meet her it's at the end of the show, and I'm supposed to go backstage to interview fucking Bryan Adams, and she's chatting me up. I think she's certainly very effusive, and in order to separate myself, I convince myself that she's fucking ditz, doesn't matter, go do your fucking job, get back to the fucking hotel and file and smoke some fucking opium or something, you know. So anyhow, I do that, and then about 2 weeks later, I see her in Phnom Penh, and then I see her writing for one of the local papers, and I go, fuck me, this girl's not stupid at all. And then I offered her the job, and then it's, you know, yabba yabba. I think I invited her back to smoke some opium, and I think, you know, with the layout of smoking opium and the body language of smoking opium, it's you know, drinking little tea with it just, you know, seduction it's just wrapped up in that picture, you know. So anyhow, I went over to LA, and I go, oh, fuck man, I knew at the airport, like, man, you've blown this one. And yeah, she arrives nicely. She had rented an apartment down on Venice Beach because she knew I was burnt out and rattled, you know. And as I said, I cleaned my act up a bit leaving, because I knew I couldn't afford to leave in the state I was in there, because, you know, I'd be looking at a very high bill to maintain that sort of lifestyle elsewhere in the world. So yeah, so I just fucking went down to the coast and closed the fucking door. But I mean, 6 days later, I was still, you know, not doing too well. And I had to organise a farewell party, you know, where there were fucking princes and ambassadors and all that. So
Was that about
that was, you know, my departure as a journalist. The agency. Cambodia. Oh no, I didn't see it. No. The second time I was an established fucking part of the community. Well, half of me was anyhow, you know. And so yeah, I needed. I had so much to fucking do. Get invitations printed out and for all this shit. So I had to, you know, dabble back in a bit, and then I fucking left. I think I went over to fucking LA with about 500 codeine tablets and a packet of Valium and brought myself down. But I got clean there, and I started jogging and swimming and actually trying to do everything right. And every day I got up, I just felt worse. It was really, and it wasn't just feeling bad physically. My brain was fucking in tatters. Like I couldn't remember the simplest thing. I don't think I spoke like I was. And a friend of mine had rung me up in Cambodia, and she used to be a junkie, and she became a Buddhist monk. And she told me she went and did rehab and all that shit, and she got clean. And she said she rang me up. I hadn't seen her in about 5 years. She said I kept on waiting for some eureka moment where all this fucking sacrifice made sense, and I got some sense of life force. But the complete reverse was happening. I was getting worse and worse with each day.
And you were staying clean and trying to do
that. I wasn't even drinking that much. I mean, she wasn't drinking at all. Now she had told me this and said, so she went to a doctor and she got tested and for HIV and Hep C, and sure enough she'd Hep C. And what we discovered later through my dalliances with the hospitals and things, if you're cleaning your act up, and you've hepatitis C, your viral load is probably because of the pressure you're putting on your liver, but it increases exponentially. So every night I went to bed, and every morning I woke up, I could hear this girl's telling me. That was the only thing that was just on repeat in my head. I knew something was seriously wrong, but it was American, like, you know, medical shit's expensive. And then I spotted a methadone clinic down the road that did blood screenings and all that shit as part of the thing. So I said, fuck that, you know, I can play this game. So I went down there and they took some blood tests that came in 4 days later, and they told me my liver functions were like just fucking, you know, off the Richter scale. So I said, well, you do HIV and Hep C, so they did, and it was Hep C. So, and I didn't take it well. I kind of went doolally, you know.
You were good on the HIV though.
I was good on HIV. I was good on the HIV. Yeah. Which was ceasing to be a death sentence at that stage. But I mean, at the same time, you could live without it. You know what I mean? It's. But yeah, I took because I.
Did you take that heavy being told? You know, you're still a young man. Because this is an interesting point, you know, and it's quite a dramatic thing.
It is quite dramatic, yeah. And
your liver's shot.
And you know, it was. I mean, everybody said it was a death sentence at the time. It wasn't going to kill you for 20 years, but you know, so I took it really badly. I mean, you know, I didn't realise I was going to take it so badly, and you know, my head wasn't in a good place anyhow. You know, I hadn't kind of, you know, after all the fucking trauma of Cambodia, I was still fucking delicate. I went, you know. I started fucking, you know, driving down to, you know, the badass parts of LA.
You were like, down Skid Row.
And Compton, all that sort of shit. Yeah.
Sure.
And doing like stupid amount of drugs. And when I'd hear a gunfire, I'd kind of smile. You know, it was just everything was just. And needless to say, I was causing this woman a vast amount of distress. You know, it's.
Had your fondness for medication, was she aware of that?
Oh, she was 100% aware of that. Yeah. I mean, you know, she didn't make it a complete life choice the way I had done, but she was no stranger to that world, you know. It's I mean, she had actually gone back. She was talking about not going back to LA, but like all those Americans that I met out there, they all turned out to be trust fund kids, because that's how they could afford to be fucking working for $400 a month on papers in Phnom Penh. But her parents were friends of the Gores, and they were at some fucking dinner party in Washington, which, although it was very straight-laced, because of her parents' connections, it was kind of exciting. And things might have panned out a bit better if I'd gone there first. But because we were getting to go to cocktail parties in Al Gore's residence, and remember like fucking queuing up to say hello to him, and Leon Panetta, who went on, who was chief of staff, and Clinton then like head of the CIA is behind you, and you're chatting to him, and you're looking at all the photographs of the places, all Indian delegations coming to see Mr. Whiteman to get raped and robbed and lied to. But there was a bit of a buzz to that. Now at the same time I was skulking around the Badlands, so once again there was
what a juxtaposition. You could be down Skid Row 1 minute and then talking to ex-vice presidents the next.
Well, actual vice presidents.
Presidents. More bizarre. Wow.
Yeah, it was. I do remember thinking. I remember because I was off, misbehaving, and I remember thinking, what the fuck are you doing? And even just to be causing embarrassment for the girlfriend or her parents and things. But the first time I met Gordon, I was whacked out of my head in GHB, and it was Mexican Day, and we were all drinking fucking tequila in the vice president's office, and I ended up spilling a drink on him.
On Gore.
With all his shoes and the end of his trousers, and it was quite fun. I was talking to him the way I talk to everybody else, like I don't taper down. So I was asking, was he thinking of running for president? And he said he'd no idea. That was in 3 years' time. I said, give me a fucking break. A man in your position knows precisely what he's doing in 3 years' time. That's why you're in this position. And he said, well, put it this way, Kevin, if I was running, you'd be the last person I'd tell. And then I noticed, like everybody else around, I was using my usual language, but everybody else was being so fucking obsequious. Anyhow, I head back to Ireland and fucking, trotted up to James's and joined the fucking Hep C clinic, and they put, they start me on a interferon course. The first time I did that shit.
So where are we now? Are we early?
We're in 97, I'd say, yeah. No, actually, we were probably only late 96, because when they gave me the interferon, I fucked off to Bosnia, because I remember being in Bosnia, with all these vials in the refrigerator and syringes and sticking them into my stomach.
This was your interferon medication.
And we were up in Prijedor, which was in the Republic of Srpska, which is where the concentration camps, the famous footage of the Bosnia of all the skinny guys. Yes. It was the hard.
You went over. Did you cover the Yugoslavian conflict?
The war had just ended. It was tense as fuck. But the active shooting had stopped. I mean, everywhere was still fucking bombed out and all that sort of shit, and it was like pretty fucking tense. But Dayton had been signed, the peace agreement in Bosnia. But fuck man, it was miserable. I leapt on the gig over there with a UN junket to be an election monitor.
Right.
So I couldn't officially write when I was there, but I could do feature pieces when I got back, sort of thing.
Yes.
So I mean, at that stage, I was kind of tweaking. This was like the methadone for travel, because I was back in Dublin and I was kind of stuck here because I had to go to the hospital. Right. So any opportunity, I had a philosophy at the time that if anyone offers you an airplane ticket to go fucking anywhere, you go and do it. Yeah. So I started a sort of sideline gig with the UN, which it was quite good for a few years. I got to go to.
With social connections like Al Gore, I'm not surprised. That
was
my next question. How do you get these gigs?
Well, actually that had nothing to do with it. I got that gig because when I was covering the elections in Cambodia as a journalist, I was up in Siem Reap, which everybody thought was going to be a dodgy area because the Khmer Rouge had hit the town 3 weeks beforehand. The elections were on over a 6-day period, 3 days in polling booths, and then 3 days with mobile booths going out to the fucking boondocks,
Okay.
By the end of day one, something like 85% of the people had voted. So the hotel I was in was full of like all the big names in the global press corps, they were all fucking there. But by the end of day two, they'd all moved out. By day three, I was the only person in the hotel. It was beautiful Conradian vibe. I'd be walking up and down these empty cars, old French hotel. It's now Raffles in Siem Reap. And I go into the dining room, there'd be 20 staff there and just me. And that was the story for 3 days. So I got myself a walkie-talkie and I tuned into the UN military observers thing so I could hear if there was any shit going down. But I decided this is a window in history. I'm going to go and do a bit of tourism. So I did like 3 days of touring the fucking temples. There wasn't a guy. There wasn't a Coca-Cola. I did not see a human. You know,
Right.
which I mean, it's just one of those windows that you're not going to get to repeat anywhere.
Yeah.
So then I'm coming back, and then day 6, I walked into the hotel. I thought, well, the sun is affecting me, because I'm sure I could hear Irish voices coming from the bar. And I go into the bar, and there's a gang of Irish people in there, and they all have been UN election observers. And I was going, how'd you get that fucking gig? Because if I was in Dublin and had a chance to go to Cambodia, they didn't get paid.
Yes.
They were volunteers, but like they got like a per diem of about $200 a day. And if you're staying out in the boonies in Cambodia, that adds up to a few bob. So they told me. So when I arrived back in Dublin, I went in to APSO, which is our Overseas Development fucking fund, and I did an interview. The interview was a bit tetchy, because there was one girl there who used to be the head of concern. I could see she did not like me. But the head he'd spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia in his day, and it just so happened we knew buckets of people in common.
Right.
So that was, and then there were a lot of gigs where only 2 Irish people were sent, and I was off on one of them. So I got to go to, I think, Bosnia 3 times. I made sure I got to Sarajevo the next couple of times. Anyhow, after that, I got to do a lot of Africa, the Ivory Coast, which turned quite dodgy.
Again, was it war reporting?
No, that was with the UN again. I mean, I was writing for myself on it afterwards, but it was.
What would you be covering out somewhere like
an election in the Ivory Coast
okay.
again? Yeah. We're there for 3 or 4 months. The Congo.
Where would your articles end up, Kevin? Typically, like what papers and publications?
I haven't been doing much journalism recently. The last few things I published were the Irish Times, but that's about 7 years ago now.
Yes.
I've tried them on a few things recently, and they do. But in the past decade, I kind of stopped doing external conflict, and I went internal instead. I brought out a book of poetry.
Yeah.
Which kind of came about through a bizarre fucking circumstance. I'd gone on another one of my fucking media campaigns against politicians. This time against Declan Ganley, who just appeared in the political scene, and I was going like, really, and we've enough scumbags in this town. We really don't need a new fascist one, and who was obviously getting bankrolled by Russia, although I didn't actually know that at the time, because like they bankrolled Brexit, anything they can do to undermine the cohesiveness of the European Union, of the West, Russian money will come in. And I knew this was shite to them, and he was so fucking arrogant, and he was so digital and smart, like he started a pan-European party, and he'd have fuckers in Poland talking about the Jews being biologically different, while his fucking candidate up in fucking Sweden was a Jew. So I just translate what the fuckers in Poland would say and send it to the fucker in Sweden, and then they'd fucking resign.
Right.
And then I did them a bit of good damage. They'd become a joke, the Simon Wiesenthal Centre, because the last Nazis were in their late 90s and things. So they kind of become an Israel supporting front, but they still had a fucking good name. So I started a petition to alert the Simon Wiesenthal Centre about Declan Ganley and his Polish counterparts that were denying the existence of Auschwitz and things like that. And so sure enough, it worked. And I got some name artists to sign it, internationally renowned ones. But I got someone else to get them, and so it all worked, and it became a headline news story. And then bizarrely, 24 hours later, obviously pursuant to a large donation, a news statement came out saying that Simon Wiesenthal Centre were working with Declan Ganley to identify fascist threats. I mean, it was but the damage had been done. One of their spokespeople said they were beneath contempt. The Simon Wiesenthal Centre were, and then but the spokesperson was for one of their European candidates, and he put the statement out in her name, and then she denied having said that, and then he called her a psychotic bitch, and then they all started ripping each other apart, all of which was being devoured by the press. So I kind of fucked these people over big time. But then the abortion referendum came up, and I kind of went a bit too, I was on the interference, I went a little bit too far on Twitter. I started, actually I can't really go into the detail, but I basically started saying, he's going on about protecting unborn children and all this, and I was going like, you know, well, would you let Declan Ganley babysit for you? But like, I kind of carried that theme on it a bit far. And then, like, you know, he's been backed up by various religious orders who had histories of child abuse, you know, and I was kind of pointing all this shit out.
Right.
And it was back when it was 140 characters on Twitter. It's very hard to give someone a headbutt and then extricate yourself and say, I'm really sorry. So he sued me.
Okay.
And I was fucked, actually. I was told it was fucked.
Was this mid 2000s?
Yeah, around that sort of time. And I was kind of active. I'd been one.
Did he win his libel?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, he did. Yeah, well, we settled out of court.
Right.
And I had to pay, you know, a substantial sum to the Poor Clares, an organisation with a history of child abuse, which to me just fucking was the proof that everything I was saying was fucking true. But I had been told by my family that, like, you know, who had, you know, rustled up some serious legal defence for me, because he had got some fucker who had just got £1 million settlement for boys' home manager, what's his name? Louis Walsh,
right.
After some guy claimed he grabbed his bollocks or something, you know.
Right.
So, and then I got some legal guy who had just defended some priest who had been libelled by RTE, some guy who'd been working out in Africa and looked like Brendan Smith, but they claimed he was a child molester, but they'd actually no proof. So he got fucking $500,000 or something. So these two, so it was shaping up with legal fucking titans. But my lawyer said, listen, like, you'd have a leg to stand on here, and with the Irish libel laws and all that. So anyhow, I had to put out an apology.
Right.
I had to agree to pay a substantial sum of damages to the Poor Clares, and they were the words I had to use. A substantial sum. The substantial sum was 50 fucking quid.
Right. Well, you had to use those words.
Yeah. Which, when some friend of mine heard about this, and he rang the Irish Times and told them, you know, it was only fucking 50 quid, he had to use those terms, you know, and so that got printed.
Is that often what happens in those terms? It's usually.
Well, I don't know.
I've seen that like so many times. A substantial amount.
Yeah. Well, I was forced to say that because he obviously wanted to gloat on his victory,
right.
And then when the 50 quid came out, he was fucking livid. But I had started a blog about them. I had to take that down, you know. So he won a few. You know, to be honest, I didn't really care, you know, because I eventually, because, you know, I wouldn't want to be doing this as a fucking career, because when you start messing with the courts, it just, the whole world becomes serious. Right. But I got away with it, and I didn't care about taking a bit of flack, as long as I was, you know, as long as I was muddying him somehow, I was prepared to accept it. Now, in later years, I've been trying to do a few things. I think that shit may have come back to haunt me, because people thought maybe I'm a bit too extreme, you know. Right. But I wasn't thinking.
How did that lead to poetry?
How did that lead to poetry? That's a good question. When I had to agree to pay the substantial sum of damages, I was in an online political forum that I helped start up, and all the people on it wanted to contribute some money towards this substantial sum of damages. And then one of them said, why don't we publish a book of his poetry, sell that, and he can try and raise some money. And I said to the girl in charge, I said, listen, I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I only paid the fucker 50 quid. I can't have all these people offering to help me, thinking like, you know, I've dropped fucking 50 grand on it or something. And she said, it'll be ridiculous, it's a book of poetry, you're not going to make any fucking money on it anyhow. You know? So I said okay, and I decided if I was going to do a book of poetry, I wanted to stretch the limits of fucking poetry, and I wanted to do lots of politically, you know, motivated sort of shit, and I wanted to do it digitally, you know, and I wanted to stick, you know, film movies in it. No, I wanted it to be a fucking circus, like, as opposed to some stupid little fucking tin little book that's dull as ditch water. So it did end up a circus. There were about 30 people working on the bloody thing. All, you know, there was a guy in Greece who ran a Greek anarchist who ran a hostel for refugees. And I remember he rang me up one day apologising for being late because Golden Dawn had attacked the fucking hostel the previous night, and he said the local police were cool in his area, so he was out with the local police fighting off Golden Dawn. And then he said he ran into some like technical shit that he couldn't do. Some Chinese refugee that was staying in the hostel took over and, you know, did all the, you know, the technical side of putting it. So it was actually kind of beautiful photography. You know, you could press the button and I'd read the shit to you. So I went to recording studios. And it was the middle of I couldn't understand why everybody was being so nice to me. And then, you know, if you're motivated about something, it's amazing the way people can help, especially if they're not that busy. And because everything was going so shit at the time. I think this was 2011, 2012. It was after the 2008 meltdown sort of thing. So a lot of people came on board. So that was kind of nice, and that got me a gig in the Dalkey Book Festival, and then the Electric Picnic, and you know. So I at the time I had lost my job, lost my house, and I was thinking I had no money to pay to go anywhere. So I thought I need to do something that I'm asked to go and do it. So I got a couple of nice gigs in Paris at the Irish Cultural Centre, and you know, supporting Lydia Lunch, as we were talking about earlier on.
So I'm going to play that at the end of the video, I hope to.
Okay,
to show you
fair enough. Fair enough. And then I started a kind of a literary sort of cabaret sort of thing called Riot that used to take place about once every 2 months.
Tell us about Riot. I had the pleasure of being involved in.
Yes, well, you performed several times there. Yeah. It was a kind of a literary cabaret. I mean, there was a lot of spoken word stuff. There was some rap. There was, you know, it was just kind of eclectic, you know, sort of underground, left of field entertainment, but it managed to reach. We used to do it in the Leeson Lounge, which was a great place because it had a proper stage, proper lighting. You know, it didn't, you know, it didn't look like just one fella in the corner of a pub.
It actually nights when they once every couple of months.
Once every couple of months, yeah. I mean, I thought if I did it too often, it might lose its kind of culty cachet sort of thing. So I thought, and what I really liked about it, you know, as I was talking about the range of people and ages in Phnom Penh. Like I remember looking out, and there was an 18-year-old with a camera there one night, and there was a retired High Court judge who was hitting 80 over there. And I remember thinking, this is working perfectly. If you can if you can get that gap, you're doing something proper. And bizarrely, for a pub full of fucking drinkers in Ireland, I mean, most of the time you could hear the fucking pin drop. Now I kept it relatively disciplined, like, you know, when it came to, you know, and like it wasn't sort of boring, but it was very passionately delivered type stuff, as you know yourself, you know. So, but I'd still kind of limited to sort of 10-minute spurts, you know, and then there'd be some music or something like that. So it never got too over the top.
They were wonderful nights, Kevin.
They were,
they were. Dublin misses them. Of course, the pandemic was on top of us.
Yes, and the place got sold.
Yes, and their original venue. So anybody out there,
anyone out there that has a venue, I mean, what used to happen in the Leeson Lounge was kind of lovely. I mean, they were all the fucking barmen were ex-sound men, so they had amazing sound. They had a stage, they had lighting, and it was free in. We used to pass a hat. But the bar would match the hat, and we normally get about 300, 350 in the hat, and the bar would throw in 350 on top of it. Now, they weren't Christian. I mean, you know, they were businessmen, so they were obviously making sufficient money that they could pay that. I mean, when I was young, like when I was 19 or something, I wanted to do three things. I had one major ambition, which, you know, I didn't realise how challenging an ambition I was setting myself. That 18, 19. That was never to be bitter, because to me bitter is the ultimate sign of spiritual failure. You know, if you can keep someone.
Well, I agree with the sentiment there, very much so.
And then on a more mundane level, I wanted to be a war correspondent. I wanted to be an advertising copywriter. I don't know why now, but I did. And I wanted to go on stage and throw words at people, with no backing, just me. And John Cooper Clarke might have been an inspiration back in the day, you know.
I remember him well.
And but yeah, and it was a good number of years before. It was only actually after the Interferon, and it was my first, because that went on for a year, and they really fucking they fucking fried me, and I was half demented on the shit, but I was also becoming, for the first time, aware that the fact that I was getting old and this whole health issues were becoming fucking real shit. And I was going, hang on a second, you know, and I was kind of bored with writing journalism and things like, you know, unless I could get to do it for Vanity Fair, some amazing way where you had such liberty, but like the constraints of conventional journalism weren't doing it for me anymore. And then I said that opportunity to write the book of poetry. So that was a new form of expression. And then once I had that, I mean, because writing it was one thing, but when I was writing the stuff at first, like I could hear it. I mean, I never used to do rhyme, but rhythm was always what I did. And that was a huge important part for me, kind of. And then I just wanted to get up on stage and do them, and then I discovered I was kind of good at it, you know. And then I got into that, you know, because it's fucking terrifying.
It's a great privilege, isn't it, to get the platform to exhibit, say, our creative process.
Yeah, absolutely,
you know,
absolutely. And when it works, when you can actually grab an audience, like you're surprised. I mean, I got up and supported a few groups up there in the Leeson Lounge, and nobody knew I was fucking coming. So there's some fucking Egypt like throwing poetry at people at 9 o'clock in the evening, and then like suddenly, bing, like the place goes silent and you can hear the pin drop, and the fucking buzz you get off that is like it's a real fucking hit, you know. I can understand, you know, the rock and roll fuckers that say like standing in, you know, a stadium, you know, playing at that sort of level is, you know, is the ultimate fucking high, you know. But like it's real adrenaline, and like the crash from it is it's so that's now, you know, to a certain extent. I mean, I still want to do it again, but I kind of feel I've done that now, you know. Like to make some money, so to do something, you know. It's and as I say, the book of poetry kind of I did decide a number of years ago that if you're going to live an unconventional lifestyle like me, you have to do things on your own terms, because, you know, the conventional world is not always going to choose you over somebody else.
If you're going to live an unconventional lifestyle, you've got to do unconventional things. It goes with it.
I mean, part of me, like, you know, I mean, I did go to rehab and all that, and they talked about childhood trauma and all that. But part of me wanted all that, because once again, it was extreme and it was everything you weren't supposed to do, you know. And part of me wanted to go, fuck the lot of you. I can do whatever I want, you know. Now, I don't, you know, I've been to that movie. I don't think there's anything I need to prove, or you know, or even like, you know, nostalgia de la blue, or like fucking living in a grotty glamour. All that shit's kind of go, like, if I get involved in that sort of crap these days, it's just because I'm a weak-willed fuck up. It's not there's no intellectual motivation going on down there anymore. And to be honest, I actually prefer being drug free these days than you know, it's a better space to be in, you know. It really is,
especially as we're getting older.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, really, it's, you know, to be at this shit at our age is like, it's dumb.
Yes, it is.
It's dumb.
But it's been wonderful talking to you, Kevin. You've been very open and candid and very honest. And you've had certainly a very interesting life, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not over.
No, it's not over yet.
A long time. Water boiled, tar dissolved, vacuum filled, buoyed in that vacuum filled plunge. We're going in, we're going down. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Late at noon, no forgiveness, no coordinates. My lie, your lie, endless lies. Huey Bell, Apache, Dorg on her dreams of milky sap. Tap me, tap me, tap me. A rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Look at the peasants run. Take me up the mountains, take me out of here. Hit the target, kill the child, find a vein. We're going in, we're going down. Bloodbath, massacre, wasted. I can't go on, I won't go on. But listen to the monkey chatter, masturbating up trees. And then she turned to me and said, don't you just love the smell of spring? Fuck me to that vacuum fill, give me a sec to goof. Fuck me to that vacuum fill, give me a sec to goof. Here come the corpses keep coming, don't you see? I need out of here, bang, pull the trigger, bang, push the plunger, bang, you're dead, dead. Till you fucking hear me dead, stay the fuck down. But they keep coming again and again and again. Human waste, bastard marshes, poison gases, jihadi hordes hitching to paradise. The mission's never accomplished. Look, the towel head is still moving. Hit him again, waste the mother, raise the gap, free fire zone, the whole shop's a shooting gallery. Pull the trigger, drop the load, light up the horizon. God, I miss Saigon. Monsoon, steamy pavements, laughing cow and W globe round. Float me up the Mekong, float me out of here. Love me, fucking long time. Pure shock, pure awe. Pure shock, pure awe. It's a curse, it's a joy. It's a curse, it's a joy. It's a curse, it's a joy. It's a cursed fucking joy. Love you, long time. Be the death of me. Shoot up, mount up, move out on the march, on the move, on the hustle. Soon as you're up, you're down. Soon as you're up, you're down. Pull the trigger. push the plunger, fuck art, fuck religion, fuck you, feel sick, feel dirty, more dead than alive. I'm right the fuck out of here. Cheers.